Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coaching the Bible. This is your host, as always, Benny Marilis. For the last 230 plus weeks, we have been working Coaching the Bible together. We've explored all kinds of biblical texts, personalities, leadership concepts, ideas, coaching principles, timeless and timely. And in each one of those episodes, it's been me talking in a monologue format. But today, Coaching the Bible gets a twist. Because for the first time, Coaching the Bible goes to conversation from monologue to dialogue. And our guest is someone who, honestly, I couldn't think of a better choice to start with. Someone who is akin to me in thinking about leadership concepts in the idea of relating and connecting it into Jewish life and spirituality and studies of the Bible and Jewish concepts. A gentleman by the name of Dr. David Leitner, better known to his students as Dr. D. More on him in just a moment. I have to be honest. The first time that I'm doing this is going to be a little bit raw, a little bit unfiltered, not perfectly edited. There's going to be a couple of mistakes, might meander even a little bit, but trust me and stay with the conversation. I promise you, it'll be worth it. Now back to our guest. Dr. David Leitner is a leadership educator, consultant, and strategist with a remarkable story. Born in the United States as the son of a conservative rabbi, Dr. D spent his early years feeling quite disconnected from deep spiritual practice. That, however, changed when he spent a year in Israel after high school, a trip that reshaped his identity and led to a lifelong connection to the country. After making Aliyah, he served in the IDF's elite Maglan Commander Unit, where unfortunately he sustained a life-changing injury during the course of that service that left him battling chronic pain. But that challenge became the catalyst, I think, for his transformation. Today, David teaches at Bar-Ilan University, runs his own strategy consultancy called Riddle. Want to guess the spelling on that? It's not what you think. It's RHYDL, and works with leaders, organizations, and communities to create meaningful change. He writes regularly on the mixture and the meshing and the overlap of biblical concepts and leadership concepts. But what makes Dr. D unique isn't just his expertise in those areas. It's his actual belief in the idea that followership is just as critical as leadership. I'll say that again. Followership, that is a concept. Followership is just as critical as leadership. His insights on this often overlooked concept are powerful, and they'll shape much of what we discuss today. In this episode, effectively episode 233 of this yet unnamed series in Coaching the Bible, we explore the story of the golden calf, not just as a failure of leadership, but as a massive crisis of followership. We'll talk about what it means to stand up to power, how middle managers often play a more significant role than you realize. You'll be surprised by that piece of the conversation. I certainly was. And why sometimes failure isn't final, it's just part of the journey. It's admittedly a deep and unfiltered and raw and sometimes meandering conversation, but if you stay with it, I think you'll walk away with ideas that can change the way you lead, the way you follow, and the way you grow. So lean in, grab a book of Exodus, join us in the conversation, and enjoy this first episode of Coaching the Bible with my guest, Dr. David Leitner. David, it's great to be with you here today. I'm super excited about this. Okay, what should we know about you that'll help us better in terms of what we're trying to do here?
So I grew up in the conservative movement in America. My father was actually a conservative rabbi, and for us, it was like eating McDonald's was a fillet of fish. That was kosher. Outside the house, we kept kosher in the house. We didn't do the whole Shabbos thing. Up until I was a senior in high school, I didn't have a clue about anything when it came to religiosity, really. I was at a 3-day and then 1 week Jew, right? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then Pesach. And I was the kid who ate the crackers in the public school.
Even though your dad was a conservative rabbi?
Yeah, it was an interesting place to be. I think a lot of conservative rabbis' kids, unless you were in a very religious community, sort of face this same kind of try and be part of the community while you're also trying to be, Jewish.
Yeah.
And I'd always wanted to be a leader, and I was the nerdiest of geeks / I was an outcasty kind of kid. So I was not a leader in any way, shape, or form. however I wanted to be. And I was also very small when I was younger. So as I grew physically, I hadn't grown emotionally and in terms of my actual maturity. And my senior year, my parents looked at me and said, David, if you go to college next year, they're going to eat you alive. So my mom offered all these options of like, go to South America. You studied, Spanish. Go here, go there. My dad slips me a pamphlet that goes, it's a leadership program for the USY here in Israel. And if you had asked me where Israel is on a map at that moment, I would not have been able to tell you where it was. I couldn't have told you what its borders were. I couldn't have told you where Jerusalem was in relation to Tel Aviv. And I could not have told you what was going on politically here, even though it was 1995 and that was like the height of Oslo. So
Wow.
yeah, I was very like in my own world. Came here and fell in love with the place. I was sold. I think Yom Kippur did it for me in some ways, because Yom Kippur, when all the kids were riding their bikes in Jerusalem, it was just amazing, amazing experience, and it pushed me into my religiosity in a way I hadn't expected. I became much more religious that year. Fell in love, was gonna live here, but my mom and I'd made a promise to her that I would go back and study 4 years in America, which I promptly broke by getting off the plane, turning her to her and going, I want to go back. And over the next year, every time we had a phone call saying those same words, to the point where I'd driven it home and my father bought me a ticket back to Israel the next summer. Came here, did OPON, did military preparation, got into the army, and then I got hurt in the army and continued on in the army even though I got hurt for 11 months. And it caused a severe nerve disorder that spreads. It's in both my legs. But when I was released from the army, I did a BA, I got married, I did a direct PhD in strategy and leadership with a focus on followership. And then I started teaching at Bar Ilan, and one of my first groups of students, one of the kids walks in, and it was in the international school that we were creating at the time. We were just creating it at the time. I was part of the team creating it. And one of the kids walks into my class and goes, hey, Dr. D, what's up? And at that moment, every student looked and went, all right, that's it. That's his nickname from here on in. And it's just gone on since then, where like generation after generation has sort of passed it on. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm Dr. D. And that's how I got that name. And during that time, I just did a lot of work sort of ad hoc on strategy and leadership with companies and friends and people who needed help. And I would say about 10 years ago now, a friend of mine heard me talking about strategy and he slips me a book, which I had never heard of before, called Sefer Yetzirah. He goes, David, you have to read this. It's an R.A. Kaplan version. And I was like, why? He said, everything you're talking about is in the first half of that book. And I was like, nah. So I read it and I was like, oh my God, there's a lot of stuff here. And that was actually my first real exposure to like deep learning. I started there, and then I went into, I have to do the Parsha every week. I needed to learn. And I just started learning so many different ways. And I've done like just loads and loads of study in different directions. It's sort of been ad hoc and very much like, this interests me, I'm going to deep dive into this. This interests me, I'm going to deep dive into that.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. Was not aware about a lot of that stuff. I love that story about how you got the title. I love it. And it stuck. Give me a little bit more. I
am a strategy and leadership facilitator and specialist. I teach at Bar Ilan University, and I own a company called Riddle, which does strategic advising and leadership. And my focus is to bring followership into organizations. That's part of how we engage leadership.
What does that mean?
Followership?
Yeah.
Followership is the decision.
To prompt it. People know what leadership is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or they think they do. Let's say minimally they think they do. What does followership actually mean from where you're coming at this from?
Followership is the choices we make to participate and give energy to make other people's ideas real. It's joining someone else's process. It's about saying, I'm on board with this, and I'm gonna be a partner. I'm gonna be a strategic partner. I'm going to, on some level, participate as a non-leader in this process. I may emerge in leadership at a moment or two during the process, but I'm not in any way, shape, or form guiding the strategic process that we're going through. But I'm willing to give my time and energy to it. I'm totally willing to give resources, my knowledge, my skill, money, if that's the case, to this process. I would say that we have to have also a mutual purpose. Followership is about having a mutual purpose as well. And those two things, the strategy and purpose, they kind of act as the glue between the leader and the follower. If you think about it, what really makes a person a leader is the fact that they have followers. No followers, no leader.
What if you don't have any followers? What are you?
an individual. The question is, do you follow yourself even? The question is, do you even follow yourself? Have you ever met someone like this where they have firm, hard beliefs on things, but when it comes down to the actual nitty-gritty of doing them, they don't follow through at all?
That's a lot of people.
Oh, well, so are they followers of their own beliefs and ideals? They have a leadership followership problem in their own lives.
But because a lot of people say a lot of things, right? They probably say a lot of things that's sort of just hot air, or they don't believe them and they say them anyway, or they don't really know. And then you're right. Push comes to shove. They're not willing to put that where, put down what they need to put down to make that really work. Right. So to actually do it.
Right. Well, I think it also depends because, look, just because I said something doesn't mean I hold it as a firm belief. When I teach and when I work with companies, one of the things we dig into is what's your ideational hierarchy? Not what's your ideology, but what are the core ideas you have that are fighting with each other inside of you as an organization, inside of you? And I'm not even talking values, just core ideas that you hold to be important. And then they fight. Those ideas fight. There are people who are both religious and liberal, and well, how does that work when you hold both those ideas? They can't both have same value when it comes to a specific topic. Choose a topic. Right. Sometimes your religious idea may be the more powerful one, the one that holds true, and sometimes the liberal one may be the one that holds true. But if you're true to yourself in those and you follow through consistently on them and you engage in processes that make your beliefs about those things real, then you're a good follower of your ideas. If you don't, or if you can get other people involved, or if you participate in a process, then you're acting in followership with other people, right? With a leader who's guiding the process somehow. So
I was just thinking that if you're a leader without followers, you're a philosopher.
Basically.
You have ideas and they're nice and they're interesting, but like you're not getting anywhere.
I actually like that a lot.
Okay. So just to give people a sense of what we're about to do, we're about to dive into the story of the golden calf.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go anything further than just say those words, the golden calf. I'm not going to give it any descriptors or any explanations. I don't want to color or put any sort of anything on what we're about to do in terms of our delving into the subject.
All right.
I won't even talk about it as the sin of the golden calf because I think that describes it. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm not saying it is. I'm leaving it all out there blank for you to help frame this. And so in front of us right now is our subject, which is the story of the golden calf. And I am prepared. I brought an English book of Exodus, 2 versions, a notebook, and a pen. At this point, I'm going to effectively give the floor to you with one sort of, I guess, opening question about the subject here, which is when you think about this event in the Bible, without getting into the specifics, sort of a global view of this story for you is what? Like, how do you think about it or perceive it globally? And then take us wherever you want to go.
If we're taking it from the leadership perspective, it's a failure of leadership. It's definitely a failure of leadership. It's really interesting because the Torah portion that we're talking about, it's got a lot of stuff in it, right? It's got the half shekel census. It's got the whole Mishkan work, the work for the temple, like what it means to build the actual, tents and everything, and the bronze and blah, blah, blah. And they appoint people to do it. And there's all kinds of, we get the command to keep Shabbat, and all this stuff is going on around this topic or that we've chosen, which is the golden calf. And in reality, each of these different things has its own, you could literally deep dive into any of the topics, all the way down to Moshe going back up to the temple and saying to God, I here are the 13 attributes of mercy. And we could deep dive into that also, which is at the end of the parsha, the end of the Torah reading, in order to really look at leadership again. But this topic of the golden calf is very, it's stuck in the middle of all this stuff. Yeah. And it's a moment which is really, really intensely interesting because many of the other ones show us almost positive aspects of leadership. Like the idea of the census being you don't treat people like numbers and don't just treat them as a number in your organization, for instance, but what is the value that they bring? What's the worth that they're bringing? It's just a simple, they use the census. They don't sit there and count people's heads. They just say, bring half a shekel, right? Bring half a shekel. And that's what you're worth in the organization for now. Everyone's equal, but but it talks about, like, it's a different way to talk about leadership. When you get to the golden calf, it's like failure after failure after failure, and then we're going to have some anger, right? Like, what's going on?
I hear that. Is it just because of your work? Is it also a failure of followership?
Yes, it is. Very much so. Very, very much so. And it's interesting because Moses right afterwards actually demonstrates what we would call strategic followership and exemplary leadership in his relationship with God right after the golden calf experience, where he basically goes up and pleads for the people and basically says, you want to kill me? You want to kill us all? Kill me too. Like, that's it. I'm done. You're not like, we're not going to finagle this in any way. And his arguments with God, if you think about it, if we look at God as leader for a minute,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, then Moshe's playing follower, and he's acting in courageous followership to stand up to God and go, nope, this, you can't do that. And that's like too much. So, like,
I'm going to put a pin in that term, courageous followership.
well, it's not mine.
No. It could be yours. I never heard before. It reminds me so much of like the concepts of like leading up and
managing up,
leading from the middle. Yeah. Maybe I'm
right.
wrong, but that
no, I don't think
like.
you are. I think that when you look at the idea of followership, there are different theories about followership. There are quite a few theories about followership nowadays. I tend to think of the best followers, as it were, as strategic partners, people who see themselves in partnership with leadership, which means that they're allowed as partners, even though we're not equal in the hierarchy, we're equal in our partnership to get this thing done, which means I'm allowed to tell you what I think. And I'm allowed to actually say I disagree, with the idea being that you will actively want to listen to me, even though I'm not the leader, but I have good ideas, and you know that I care about this passionately, and therefore we both want the same outcome here. Maybe you want to take my advice on this, right? And it does take an act of courage to do that, especially with all-powerful beings that can zap you with like a thought. Or the person who can fire you, at the drop of a hat.
Right. You have to bring it down into two-person actual real situations outside of the Almighty to apply it to where we are.
Yeah, but if you think about it, literally, like, if you go up to your boss and he's declared to you in a meeting, one-on-one meeting, okay, I think that we should be doing A, B, C, D, and E, and you go, I firmly disagree with that, and you feel like you can do that, or you're willing to take the chance to do that, you are acting as a strategic partner. You're acting in exemplary followership. That's one term which we can use. It's from, I don't remember his name, courageous followership, which is from Ira Shalaf. There's any number of ways we can look at it, but really, that act of followership is not managing up. I'm not trying to get you to do some project that I think we should do and trying to get you on board for that. In which case, what am I trying to really do? I'm trying to act in emergent leadership. And what I'm asking from you is to be my follower for a moment and provide me with the energy and the support and whatever security you can in order for me to actually act on this as an emergent leader, which is a very different way of looking at it. But that's not what's going on here. Right. What's going on here is Moses is saying, I don't want to be the new nation. We have a nation. I'm protecting my people, which is a very important act of middle management, right? Or team leads, right? My team messed up. God, boss, my team messed up, but that's on me. If you're gonna say I get to stay and you're gonna fire all of them, no. Either we all go and I'll leave like that, or you accept the fact that I'm responsible for this. I'm willing to take the hit. And here's why you need to stay with us and stick with us anyway. And I'm going to vouch for these people. And I'm going to tell you why keeping them on board is so important.
I have so many questions. I really want to get inside this with you. I never thought of Moses as middle management before. I have to be honest.
Most people don't.
I would say all people don't, right? It's not a space, the way I always looked at it, I thought was that God was the owner of the company and Moses is the CEO of the company, right? He runs it.
Same thing. It's not that different.
I know. You're right. Maybe it's just simply just the terminology is
The
different.
terminology is a little bit different, but fine. Okay, I can accept either one.
You're right. He's not the ultimate authority as the leader. Oh, okay. That's a super interesting point for me. Just to, I think for a lot of people suddenly now to think that they're Moses too, right? Because they're middle management is like, I never thought of myself as Moses. I'm a low middle manager in the company. And now you're saying, no, listen to Dr. D. Dr. D is saying you're in some way, shape, or form equal footing to Moses. Now, the reason why that's super interesting to me is because, and I think this is true for a lot of people, there are a lot of what I'll call Bible inspired people in the world. They try to live their lives in congruence with biblical principles, religious principles that are rooted in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're very hard to connect to. Yeah. Part of why I like that I've been doing this thing with Coaching with the Bible is to bring it down into real terms for people in their day-to-day lives and for them to coach themselves effectively based on all these ideas. Sometimes it's super hard because you don't connect. So you don't connect to the person, you don't connect to the idea. And if you always look at Moses like up here, for those of you just listening, my hand is above the screen. So Moses is up there. I'm not Moses, right? I'm not Abraham. I'm not Moses. And now you're coming along, massive new concept, I think. Moses is middle management. You're like, okay, hold on a second. Like, stop the clock like that. I don't think people think that way.
At some level, like, it depends on how we look at this hierarchy, doesn't it? Like, okay, call him a vice president. Call him vice president. Call him whatever you want. I don't care where you look at him. But what he's demonstrating here is not just leadership. It is also followership. And here's the thing, most leaders, also followers. Like any organization you look at, or just look at yourself as an individual, at least 80% of your life, you're going to be a follower. That's just how it is.
Right. It actually spurred I remember reading there's a great book on the subject of managing up. I think it's Professor Bennis, I think it was his name, maybe on the subject. Doesn't matter. In the back of the book, he has 3 sections on biblical narratives where he shows someone managing up. And actually one of them is the end of this story where Moses goes and pleads for the people, right? Which you referenced earlier. We haven't even gotten into the story yet, by the way. 25 minutes into the conversation, we haven't touched actual details. But
Welcome to my life. Welcome to my life.
I'm going to force you inside because we have to show some of this. So in that piece, he talks about, the first one he talks about in there is Abraham pleading for the people of Sodom in that whole event, how that one works or doesn't work, right? The second one is this one, where he's Moses pleading for the people. And the third one has to do with a story in the book of Samuel, which will be for a different guest. It doesn't matter. But if we get that far. So it actually is interesting. I didn't remember to think that he effectively is using or viewing Moses as minimally an intermediary. But more than that, he is effectively the middleman between the people and God all the time. You just don't think of him as middle management. He's not Michael Scott in my own mind here for an Office reference, right? He doesn't appear to be the guy running the paper office for Dunder Mifflin in Scranton, Pennsylvania. That's not how I see Moses. But
if you think about what it means to be middle management for just a moment, middle management is by far the hardest place to be in any organization, right? Because you got the people underneath you who are making all these demands of you. You got the people above you who are making all these demands of you. And you literally are required to both act in extensive followership, translating everything this person wants for those people down there, and taking all the things these people need and somehow getting other people involved and convincing people above you and the people at your level that they should be participating in your strategic processes, in your team's work, and why you need resources. Like, that's what Moses does. We need water. We need food. We need this. Help me with these people. I don't know what to do. Da-da-da-da. Like, that's Moses. Like, come on.
That's true. Okay. I'll buy it. I'll buy it and I'll buy it. Okay, good. So take me inside here. Where do you want to start?
I actually want to start in Exodus 24. Just
start
for a
wherever
moment.
You want.
Okay, in Exodus 24, we're going to go, I think, Exodus 24. I think it's number 14. Let's take a quick look. Right. So just to put it into context, what's going on right now is Moses is about to go up to the mountain. Okay? And he brings Aaron and people and the 70 elders and all these people with him. And he says to them, wait here you guys wait here with Aaron and her. Aaron and her are going to be, I'm leaving them with you. They're there. So if anyone has any legal matters, and he's, if you have any, thing you need to ask about, talk to them. And then he goes up on the mountain. Now, there's a question here, well, how long is he going up for? There's a lack of information freaking given here. Now, we know from context that at some point they were told 40 days. They were told 40 days.
Right. It's not, it's a super, where I really don't, I in my own head, as I'm thinking about it with you now, I don't know the reference point at which they find out that he's going to be gone for 40 days.
Okay. So if we jump now to 32, which is essentially when the people are going to go a little bit nutso on him.
Yeah.
All right. And we look at the commentaries. Rashi actually gives us an understanding of this, where he says, Rashi says, for the, Moses goes up the mountain and he said to them, 40th day, I'll be back on the 40th day. Okay. But if you think about this from
where?
In 32:1,
I'm saying the commentary is quoting, he's not quoting a biblical verse.
Nope.
That says, right, that we know of.
Not that I've got, right? So he's just saying, right? If I read the Hebrew of it, right? Ki kishala Moshe lahar amar lahem lesof 40 yom ani ba latoch sheshot. Right? I'm coming down in 40 days. Now, I don't have a reference for when this happens in the actual Torah.
Right.
But let's say that he actually said it. Okay, let's just imagine for a minute that he actually said that. Because it's not in the Torah. But I'm going to go with Rashi knows what he's talking about.
Right. Fine. Fair.
Is that enough information for these people to really feel secure and know what that means? Has he explained to them what 40 days actually means? Has he explained to them what they should expect? Has he explained to them the nature of what's about to happen? Because if we think about what leadership is for a minute, like good leadership, when the leader is going to be gone for a while and he sort of puts some other people in temporary leadership positions, tries really hard to over-communicate, to tell them as much as humanly possible so that there is a limited amount of ambiguity. Yeah. Take your pick of words we could use here.
Right.
And this is Moshe fails big time on this one. He just goes, I'm going up for 40 days. There's Aaron, there's her. Got any questions? Talk to them. Bye. And he's off. Okay.
So issue number one, forget, you didn't even touch just the mental state and the emotional state of the people at this moment, right? You only simply just said issue one in this effectively failure of leadership, crisis of leadership, however term you want to use it here, is a communication issue. Is it an overestimating where the people are? Is it just, I've never done this before, so I don't know how to do this?
I think that if you read the text itself, what it suggests is that Moshe is really trying to balance between what God wants from him and what the people need from him. The people see Moshe, right? If we go into this a little bit further, right? Why do the people come to Aaron in literally the next line, right? Or in this line and the next line, and they go, hi, we're talking about 32 run, right? In 32:1, it says, when people saw that Moses wasn't coming, right, down from the mountain, they gathered to Aaron and they said, come make us a god who shall go before us, for that fellow Moshe, the man who brought us from the land of Egypt. We don't know what's happened to him. Where did they come from? Oh, Egypt. What was in Egypt? Oh, that's right, Paro. Who was Paro? He was God, which means that the people are still in a mindset where Moses is, in some way, shape, or form, God. That's how how often do they turn to God versus turning to Moshe? Even if you go to Sinai, right, the Sinai story and the whole concept of Sinai, right, who is supposed to get what Moses is getting? Everybody. But what do the people say? Oh, we can't do it. You go do it for us. That's what happens. So Moses is in some ways this godly figure, replaced Paro-esque, I guess you could sort of say, even though that's not what he wants.
I understand. It's master to master, right? It's on some level.
Yeah, very much so. And so what's going on here is that essentially the person who is the all-powerful can bring us food. He's the one who can talk to God and get everything we need. He's gone. We need somebody or something else to replace him. You, Aaron, are not going to do. We know that about you. You're not going to cut the mustard. You need motion to be able to do what you do. Oh, now what? And so what does Aaron do? He says, go get me gold. I'll take care of this for you. No problem. I'm not going to fight you on this. I'm not going to fight, go get the gold from your women's ears and da-da-da.
Okay. So I get that. So I want to stop for a second. And the way you've sort of portrayed this, you have, like, if it's a chessboard or a risk board, whatever board you want to use, to age myself for a second, right? You have initially you have Moses and his troop of leaders, right? That's clan 1. You have the people, which is group 2, and then you have the mountain on fire, which is like right behind them, right?
Yeah.
So for all of time until this moment, leading up to this moment, there's one guy, and that one guy is Moses. All the other people are, Aaron's important. He has a role to play for sure. He's significant leading up to this point in many ways. The others, the elders, however you want to term them, also. But now what's happened is that the singular most important person all of their lives has self-removed from the situation, right? Without communicating it in great detail. And now you have effectively Aaron in charge of that group. You have the people on the other side of that, and Moses is gone. So for 40 days, 40 nights, we have no idea what's going on in the camp, right? Clearly they're stressed because we get that, right? Once the count ends, he doesn't come back, they flip out, right?
Okay.
So there's this leadership void that you're saying Aaron can't fill. They know that he can't fill it. Aaron himself seems to think he can't fill it because he goes right to this other idea. And
I mean, there isn't
a power vacuum. It's like a vacuum. Like, how do you?
I think part of how you can look at it is a power vacuum. I think that what happens here is interesting in that Aaron could have stepped up. He could have stepped up and said, hold on a second. Moshe said he would be back. Are you certain when 40 days have passed that we should be taking this step? Aaron could have taken actions that he didn't. He went for the easy out, which was let the rule of the masses win, right? Don't stand up for the actual idea and ideals that we know to be true. And it's a hugely impactful thing that he does, because he, who is eventually going to be the high priest, right? He may not have meant to make the calf. He may have taken all this stuff and thrown it in the fire just to get rid of it so that it would melt, which is part of the stories that we sort of get about this to make it okay. And that, like, there was some stone or something that when he threw it in, that's what made it happen. But functionally, he's saying, sure, bring me the gold. I'll resolve this somehow. And when you look at that and you think of that, you go, wait a second, what do you mean you're going to resolve it with gold? Is money going to make this all better, right? If I throw more money at this, is it going to make it better? It's a very, 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 very bad leadership strategy, leadership concept, if you think about it.
Have you ever studied this with students as a subject, where you look at it and think, okay, so stop for a second here, and let's. I know Aaron's not my focus, but Aaron is a player here in this story, right? How does he? What other options does he have legitimately in the void with Moses being gone? Like, you've described it, but how do you see that? Like, take it as an example. It's a modern situation. You're a communal leader, whatever it is.
You're a boss. Hold on. Yeah. You're a boss, and your people come to you and they say, the CEO is gone for a week because he's on vacation and he hasn't come back yet. And he wasn't clear whether was he coming back on Monday or was he coming back on Tuesday. Okay. But the people are like, we need answers. We need answers now. What's going on? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Like, hello, give us answers. And instead of saying, wait a second, I'm not going to let the panic that you are trying to bring forth rule this company. Take a moment. Think about what we need to do. Maybe we need to pray for a second. Maybe we need to just take a moment and breathe. Maybe we need to look at what we've done over the last 40 days, because we know over the last 40 days, some people have been behaving not so good, right? We know that things like they had a mishtan, like they were a little bit drinking and a little bit of this. So wait a second, before we start taking a different path, let's hold to what what we know is right and true. What are the next things we need to do? We know that we need to start understanding or getting ready for Shabbat. We know that we need to start doing these other things. We know that we need to take the next steps in our strategic plan, in our strategic concept. This is what we're working on. Let's work on that. He doesn't do any of that. He immediately goes to, okay, you guys win. I'm not going to stand up to you at all.
So I'm so curious about that, right? In unpacking this, again, leaving out the rest of it for just a moment. So what about, is it something about Aaron? Is it something about Moses because he's so overwhelming, let's say, as a person, as a leader, as, like, what about Aaron just makes him go to that choice as opposed to one of the things you just described? It's like almost he has the opportunity to like strategically delay, right?
Which is one of the things that people suggest is going on here. Like if you read some of the commentaries are saying his request for gold, he was hoping that the women who were Satkaniot would be the ones to go, no, start a fight, and therefore have a dialogue start taking place for like, so there is that aspect of perhaps that's what he was trying to do. But what happens when the stronger, more powerful people in an organization push for something and they bully people to get on board, even if they don't really want to be on board, because and the leader isn't taking a solid stance. It's called alienated followership. It's, I have a better idea, let's do this. And then you convince all these other followers that we should be doing that. And then the leader's lost his followership.
Wait a second. So Aaron's not the leader. I know,
I mean, technically he is right now. Moshe literally said he and Hur are the people in charge.
Yes, I'm saying he's been deputized to have the title, but they don't buy it. And as long as things are fine, it's fine until it's not fine. And then you have this moment. So in that last, what was the term? Alienated followership. That's the term you used. Is that? So I'm curious for a minute. Is it the people buy actually the new idea, or the stress and the anxiety of the original situation is too much for them to manage?
I'll give you an example. Hold on. I'll give you an example from modern day. Ready? Hold on. I'll give you an example from modern day. Can I do this? Okay. Leader of a team has just been moved up to another position, and everybody loves him. And he's phenomenal and he's great. And they bring in somebody new, and he starts making changes to the team. And there are people on the team who go, that's not how we do it. That's not how we do it. That's not how we do it. And he gets, and he's an alienated follower, and he pulls a whole bunch of other people who are like, that's not how we do it. That's not how it's supposed to be. That's not how it used to be. That's not how, that's not what we do. And if you went and asked that guy who's now working at a different company and is in a different position because he got a raise and whatever, and he left, right? How are we supposed to do? Oh, you know what? This is not the way to do it. We should be doing it this way. If he gets enough people on board, what happens to the leader's ability to get anything done?
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone. Same thing.
Okay. I get that. Does it not matter? However, I'm not trying to, well, on some level, I'm trying to lift some of the blame in terms of we didn't even get to the calf yet, but it's going to be a two-parter. Okay. So does that lift some of the blame from the eventual story here, because maybe they don't actually buy it, but they do it because they don't have a better solve other than standing pat and doing
followership
nothing.
Is a choice.
Oh, that's a t-shirt right there. Okay. Followership is a choice. You have to choose to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Fine. Now in that space, because this is your area of expertise, and what are the parameters then of choosing followership? What does that mean?
Well, if we think about it in this case, let's talk about it in the reference to the golden calf for a minute.
You can talk about it however you want.
I'm just going to take us back to the golden calf so that we can at least sort of maybe close. We'll get there a little bit. There was a group of people who actually chose strategic followership in relation to the golden calf, and they were
the Levites.
That's correct. So it's not that there wasn't a group advocating for maintaining the strategic process that they started. It wasn't that there wasn't a group that wasn't saying, hey, wait, our core ideas are solid core ideas. Why are you guys doing what you're doing? There was that group. That group was not powerful enough in the overall grouping to influence and pull enough of the group towards that path. And as a result, the alienated followers, who was a much bigger, much louder group, and we know the loud people in the room tend to pull people along very often, right? pulls everyone that way. And then what happens? Even the women who are the tzadkaniot don't give up much of a fight. Now, you have to remember that this also comes right after there's been this request for bring your gold, bring your silver, bring your bronze, bring your this, give whatever you want towards the sanctuary that we're going to build, give your artistry. So like, it also comes right after people have already been asked to give towards something, which is godly. So now you're asking me to give towards godly again. I can do that. Like it's almost resting on that idea in some way. And the people who did that, like there's a reason why the Levites go and kill these people. There's a reason why you fire someone who is inherently bad as a key lock person to team who consistently brings the team down. Even if they're exceptional at their work, right? They can be like massively great at producing and productivity and, you know, making sure they get things done on time on an exceptional level. But if nobody trusts them, they treat people like garbage and they're constantly badgering people and they're constantly making people feel bad and it's destroying the teamwork and it's making it hard to be part of the team. And the team itself is not producing well because of that person, or it is producing well, but doesn't feel good. What do you do to that person? Now, there are companies that would leave that person. That's a mistake. So here's what happens, right? Moshe goes up. Moshe comes down after Aaron's created this calf, and the people are literally having a party around this calf. Yeah. He gets furious, and he takes what is essentially the lifeblood and work that is supposed to the item that is supposed to represent the covenant between the people and God, and he smashes it down. This is the CEO coming back or the boss coming back and going, no, hammer going down on now. Everybody has to we're returned to office. Things aren't going the way I want. Everyone's back in the office on Monday. Let's go. We're going to have that meeting. This is very much that I'm coming in and I'm coming in hard. And he calls out Aaron and he calls out the people and he grinds the calf up and he makes them drink it. And what does he say? He calls for the people who are on his side. He goes, Mila Hashem alai, right? Like that's where that saying comes from.
Yeah.
And the Levites are the ones who step up, right? So he's actually acting in this new form. Like he brings a new aspect of leadership. It's very decisive. It's very, very like rigid. It's very not Moses in a lot of ways. Like this is the kind of new Moses that we're seeing here, Moshe. He's coming in with like, I'm bringing the hammer down. And it's me. It's not God. Me. I'm bringing it down because you pissed God off and you made me look bad. Now, albeit it's partially his own fault.
Yeah, so that's where. Yeah, so let's unpack that for a couple of minutes here, right? He comes back down. He heard this is going on. Right? He heard something's going on. He doesn't know exactly what's going on. We're not even going to talk about Joshua. Let's leave Joshua out of the picture entirely here. Just because he's a whole other subject. I just don't know. I don't know what to do with him. I don't know what to do with him in this story because it's feel like, I don't know. Moses comes down. He sees the calf. He sees what's going on around the calf. The people are having, as you said, a feast, a party. They're dancing, the whole thing. And he's enraged. He's burning. He's burning on fire, effectively. And what you just said is that on some level, it's his own doing. That never comes up.
No, because the idea that it's his fault for not being more communicative is only a minor aspect of the greater issue here. The greater issue is that the people aren't real followers. This generation of Israel are horrible followers of God. And they're the ones who experience him firsthand.
You know, it's amazing. It's an amazing point. But I want you to unpack that for me more. Like they're quote unquote bad followers, albeit they've seen everything, right? So
there's a concept called yes people in followership.
Conversation on some level has shifted to really focus on followership, which is great because I think that's where we belong on this conversation. But and it can be a conversation around followership, because what's the failure of followership here in this, like maybe in general because you've studied the subject, or in particular in this event, in this moment, is a failure of followership the failure of leadership vis-a-vis the followers? Is it just we have bad apples? Do we blame the coach? Do you blame the team? How do you see that? And is it fixable? Do they fix it later on?
No, they die in the desert.
Is it fixable?
It is. They could have fixed it. They get multiple opportunities to fix.
Okay, so unpack
Okay, so
this.
there's a concept in followership. If we talk about followership for a moment, okay, one of the theories that's out that one of the very first theories that came out, and I'm for some reason drawing a blank on his name, and I'm very bad at this, which is why I have slides as a teacher.
Yeah.
But there are he has basically four major quadrants in a square. Okay, you have the wolves, the alienated followers you talked about. You got your exemplary followers, those courageous strategic partner people. You've got your yes people, right, who will always sort of say yes, and they'll do what they have to do, but their participation will be very limited. They're not going to come up with new ideas. And then you've got your sheep. Okay, the people in this generation are either sheeps or wolves for the most part. Levites are one of the main groups that doesn't apply to. So they fall within that realm of maybe exemplary follower. I don't know how much they bring their own independent thinking as much as they are yes men, but they're active yes men. They are very active. You tell us what to do and we are going to do it kind of people, right? They're the extreme version of that. They're even, I would say, when you get to it, like you can get into like diehard. There's different, another theory talks about like, loners all the way up to diehards, and it's just a level of engagement. And the Levites are like diehards in their engagement level. Like that's just who they are.
And in this community, the people here in the desert are either, other than the Levite group, everyone is either wolf.
They seem to either be sheep, right? Which is sort of this just make sure things happen that need to happen. Don't expect much of me. Just if you want something, you're gonna have to prod me to get me to actually do it. Right? Or alienated. Why is he doing this like this? Why is this not happening? Why don't we have food? Why don't we have water? You want me to jump into that? We would have been better to stay in Egypt. So that generation, as amazing as it is, like they experience God firsthand.
Yeah.
And at the same time, their level of followership, if we were to use like different metrics, pretty low. And it doesn't change. Like, when God wants to send them into Israel and he says, send, and they go, well, we want to send spies. Okay. Or it's not really spies because there's a whole concept of like, it's not really spies that's written there. It's another word, but whatever. Send people to go check out the land. Okay. And they come back and 10 of those people come back and go, oh, we can't do this. Now we can't do this. Even if God's with us, we can't do this.
Okay. So what does it take? It's so interesting to me. What does it take then for somebody or some group of people to actually become the right kind? I don't know what else to term it. The right kind or the good kind of follower.
Let's say in a more positive version of followership. This is about choice. It very much is about choice. And we know that it's possible to do it in this era, in this time, because the Levites do it.
And they're not different. They are different on some level because they didn't slave away in the same way that everybody else did in Egypt.
Exactly. So their own experience is different. Their previous experience is different. Therefore, their present experience is different if we look at the story, and the outcome is also different. Who they become later on is also different.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, there's a whole psychological aspect here of like where you come from impacts what you do today, which will impact where you go to the future, unless you choose to change it.
Okay, so the people who experience this firsthand by being in the desert and seeing God in this way, experiencing everything from the plagues to the sea splitting to Mount Sinai, all that good stuff, right?
They have a hard time making this. They have a hard time making that choice. It's hard for them
because of their lived experience as slaves.
Yeah.
Do we not give them enough credit then for that being part of their experience?
We should totally give them credit for the fact that the reason that, like, a big part of the reason why they didn't make it to Israel, actually make it, is because they were the slave generation. And they deserve a ton of credit for every step they took along the way and didn't run back to Egypt.
Right. There's a comment from, I'm trying to remember which book, but Yaakov Kamenetsky.
Okay.
In his commentary on the Bible, where he talks about appreciating their lived experience. Again, it's only been triggered just by the conversation that we're having. And not blaming, I wouldn't say not blaming them, but at least appreciating where they're coming from in these moments. And so when the moment happens, because I want to get to the sort of the trigger moment, the moment happens where Moses doesn't come back down and Aaron goes towards the calf idea, that trigger moment. So in his writing, I'm pretty sure this is how he writes it. So that sets them off, right? There's no coming back from that moment at that point, right? And so it's the lived experience. I'm trying to understand, like, on some level, we've been better followers, quote unquote, since then than we were then at that moment. And on some level, it has to do with not even choice, it has to do with the lived experience being different than then. But you're saying is that even if you've lived the bad experience, the slave experience, you can still choose. This is so like Viktor Frankl-ish for a moment here. Like you're just
It's super Viktor Frankl.
Okay.
But I'm going to take it a step further. If you were to take a look at some of the most spectacular leaders, business leaders of the last 2 generations, 3 generations, how many of them come from a poor family, a family that didn't have very much, that they had to scrape it, to make it, to push themselves, to force themselves to work long hours. They knew that they were going to do that. And then they made it. And then they created that thing. And then they made it big. And then why are they successful? Their lived experience up until that point was, we're poor. We have nothing. I don't get to go to university. I barely get to go to school. I have to, if I have to skip high school days in order to be at McDonald's in order to flip burgers or whatever it is. And yet you hear these amazing stories of those people stepping into themselves and going, no, I am not going to accept that lived experience as the one that I have to live into my future. What?
Because they're choosing not to.
And that's the answer. Because they're choosing not to. And that's not even that's an internal followership choice. Like, I'm going to follow my true self, what I believe I'm capable of, what I believe I'm going to do. Now, that's an internal choice. But the fact is the moment they make that choice, you know what happens? A lot of people want to follow them.
Right. The consequence or the result of making that decision is a number of things. One is that every decision that they make after that changes, right? Because they're always going to choose a different, the path that's not the path that was going to set them down that road. So they're always going to choose the hard work. They're always going to choose the challenge. They're always going to choose to continue. They're not going to give up. And as a result,
the ones that did and the ones that do give up, let's be honest about it, they're the ones that don't make it. Those are the stories we never hear.
Right. And then it's not what they're looking for, but as a direct result of that set of decisions and pathways that they're going down, then there's an attachment, right? A followership that accrues as a result of that, right?
Yeah. Because when they speak and they talk about what it is they want to do and what they are doing and how they are doing, people ascribe to that. It's the ideas that they talk about, how passionate they are about those ideas, and the way they present those ideas are so, and they don't even have to be charismatic. It's just the idea itself speaks to people. And people go, oh, I'm on board with that. I will definitely be a follower of that idea. I'll help you make that real. Let's do that.
What's sticking in my head here is the notion that we're always described as a stiff-necked people. And that followership for us, I think that's part of it, is hard.
It is, and yet it isn't. Because, for instance, if you look at the Hasidim, right, or the Charedim, followership for them is easy. I have a Rebbe, I follow what he tells me to do, and that's it. But it's the sheeple version of followership. Sorry to have done that.
No. But then take
the
me
real
back.
Followership, strategic followership is hard for us. Strategic partnership is hard for us. It's hard for us to be exemplary followers. It's hard for us to be even yes men. We don't like being yes men. It's just not what we like to where we like to be as a people. It's hard for us. We'd much rather be argumentative, and we'd much rather be like, nah, and or okay, I guess I'm following him because he's the Rebbe or he's the whatever, and I follow what he does. And this is no disrespect for the Rabbanim and no disrespect for anyone else. That's just part of who we are. It goes back to this generation that we're talking about in the desert.
I feel like I didn't resolve anything. I just have so many more questions.
Sorry.
As I said, we didn't even get to the actual event itself. Because it sets up in my head like weird sort of question is like, how did they get it so wrong?
But they did. No. Okay. So hold on. I don't think we should put it in that frame. I'm going to stop you because I don't think they got it wrong. I think if you read what's actually going on, if you read the entire thing, there are people seeking meaning. We're using Viktor Frankl. There are people seeking meaning. And the problem is that God is very out of their reach. They can't experience God without dying. Moshe can. They can't talk to God directly without some major consequences involved. Like, it's like the little peon going to the CEO and going, you need to give us a whole bunch of money for my team because our team's gonna rock it because A, B, C, D, and E. And the CEO going, why are you talking to me? Go away. Right? Like it's just not, I don't want to say that they're wrong. They're not. What they are is the people who are in transition. They're transitioning from being slaves into being free people, and they are going through a crucible of hugely difficult, conflicts that they have to face time after time after time after time. And what happens is that each time they choose poorly. And whether they choose poorly because they're afraid, or whether they choose poorly because of their previous experience, or whether they choose poorly because the ability to believe, even if you've seen it, is hard. I'll give you an example from October 7th. There are people who've seen the videos. There's people who've seen everything. There are people who've watched those videos and they still believe that Hamas is good. Same answer.
Okay, I get it. I'm still coming back to the Bible though for a second here. Because it leads to just this large question of God is all knowing, right? So the people get to Sinai in a state that they're not ready for it. So this is moving away from followership. This is a much more maybe
Leadership.
Deeper question of leadership, or of developing followership.
Yeah.
Of preparing better so that the outcomes are better. And if it's all knowing, how do we get it so wrong? It's a disaster.
It is. And at the same time, when we look at it, God gave us free will. And we know that part of this discussion of, well, God's all knowing, what does that really mean? And there's a whole, that's a to go into which we're not even going to be able to touch. But for a moment, how many doors does God put in front of us? And then we choose one, and that door is a one-way door. There are two-way doors, right? You can go through it and come back again and go, that was a bad choice. I'm going to go back. But then there are one-way doors. You go through it, and that's it. You're done. You can't make another choice, right? And that's how the world is created. That's how the world works. And we get doors put in front of us, okay? How we choose is totally dependent on us. The doors are dependent on God.
Fascinating.
And so what I think when we talk about all-knowing, almighty, all-knowing, he knows what outcomes will be. But when you make that choice, that's when certain outcomes start shutting down. Right? Why is it that God says on the mountain, when Moses goes back up or when Moses is being told, they're going to be whatever, they're going to, let me just destroy them. You become a nation. It'll be great. And Moses is going, no. Moses could have said yes. Right. Why does Moses say no? Because Moses believes in the core principle of who the covenant is made with. It was made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? And that's his argument for it on the mountain, is you made this covenant with everybody, not with me, with everybody. That means even when we make bad choices, we are still your people. Even when we do stupid things, we are still your people. And you, God, have to figure out how to work with us, and not by proxy. You can't send angels. You have to figure out how to work with us. And God backs down on the mountain as part of the golden calf experience, when the people are literally putting a different God up in front of them and dancing to it.
You mean God backs down because God doesn't destroy them?
Yeah. He only kills the people who are actively involved in it, the people who took this idea to its limits and did something that was so bad that they can't, there's no going back through that door. Everybody else gets a pass.
Relatively speaking, right. They don't get killed.
Well, on some level, they don't get killed now, and they get the opportunity to try again. And I think that this is an important part of leadership and followership, is that we as people, if we look at this experience of the golden calf, if we really look at it in depth, if we look at Moses' failure in communication, Aaron's failure in leadership, the people's failure in followership, failure's okay as long as you try and learn from it and do better next time. And they try and do better next time. They do, they try. And they try again, and they try again. And there are certain people who step up each time, who try and push the people in a different direction.
Right. Well, the second time they effectively get it right, because it doesn't happen the second time, right? They've learned that lesson, right? Okay, no golden calves the second time. If Moses is late, we should wait. We should hold on a second and maybe, take a breather, go for a walk, and come back and see if Moses is available, right? In an hour from now. right? Maybe flip on the Netflix for like an hour, watch, binge a show for a couple hours and see if he's back later, right? So they do get that part right, but it does change the relationship. You can't, it doesn't heal, 100%. At least it doesn't seem to.
No, but that's also true. That's also the nature of leaders and followers. When a group of followers revolts against you, will you ever trust them on the same level again? If you're the leader.
I mean, you could say you would. I doubt that you do.
It's a lie.
Okay, you were less circumventing that than I was. But...
No, I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it what it is. I'm going to call it what it is because I feel like it's very important for us to be honest about this. When someone breaks trust in a relationship of leaders and followers, whether it's the leader who broke trust, and here's a good example. Okay, I have a soldier. He's a Samech Mempe. I work with him sometimes on leadership, and
for the people who are not so.
Samech Mempe, he's the person who is the he's not in charge of the company, but he is the what's the word for it? The second in command for the company commander. Okay, and which means that he's got basically 120 soldiers under his responsibility. And one of his lieutenants would promise things to his soldiers and then not follow through. Just as an example, when you make a promise to your people on a team, yeah, we're going to get out early. Everyone's going to be done by 12. We'll be out of here. Yeah, if we get this done, there'll be bonuses. Yeah, if this, that, or the other, here's what's going to happen. And then you don't follow through. What happens? Trust gets broken. You do it once, people might forgive you. You do it twice, shame on me, shame on you. Like, shame on you, shame on me. Right? I think that's the saying. Yeah. People, that's what happens. It's not new. Right? And God is, if you think about it, super forgiving. How many times do we get it wrong? And even when we get it wrong, he lets the next generation in. Even when we get it wrong, he lets the next generation in. That's huge.
It is. It feels, but for me, like, it feels like it was flawed from the beginning, like it was doomed to fail from the start. But maybe
the people still made it through the desert.
Let's say that again.
The people still made it through the desert. Like, we have to remember that, even with the man and even with everything else, the people kept walking. The people kept moving. They didn't just go, okay, I'm done. I'm going to sit here, whether I die from the rattlesnakes or I die because God puts me to, kills me off tonight when I dig my own grave, which is what they were doing, right? The generation was, there's this story that they dug their own grave and went to bed in it at night. So let the rattlesnakes take me. Right? But they don't. They keep going. That takes a lot to keep going when you know that you're going to die in the desert. You know you're going to die in the desert and you still keep walking? That's crazy. I mean, it's beautiful in its craziness. Just to put it out there.
Because it sets up the next generation, because it means that they still believe it, right?
It's also the sacrifice parents make for their children. I know. But if you think about it, leadership and followership are part of parenting.
Is that right? I guess that's true. Okay.
Just to put it out there.
No, that was amazing. Just to sort of wrap it around, we started with this idea that this was a crisis of leadership or failure of leadership. As we progressed, we moved from a failure of leadership to a failure of followership. And we spent a long time inside the space of followership and appreciating what that is, how that works, why it works sometimes and why it doesn't. What did we miss?
I think we missed two things. I think we missed the aspect of what does it mean now for Aaron to become the high priest? Because he's still going to be in a position of leadership, A. And B, what does it mean for the people? Because God puts a plague, like, it's not just that the Levites go and kill people. God actually does take action here. And that's an act of leadership as well, which we don't get into, which is God sends a plague into the people. And it's literally like, that's how he catches everybody and goes, well, nope, not you. Yes, you. And that's like, this is a purging of alienated followers. It's an attempt to right the boat. And it's not Moses who has to do it, right? It's God. God as leader has to take that act because Moses can't. He's that middle management where he can't purge that many people on his own accord. He can kill 3,000. Done. No problem. This is going to be a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah.
And so I think there's more to it than this. I really do think that if we want to look at the bigger picture of the golden calf represents both the aspect of very much the aspect of failures in leadership, failures in followership, and at the same time, beautifully decisive leadership, elemental leadership of Mila Hashem Alai, who is with me on this core idea, right? And beautifully strategic followership by the Levites, and then, it's the thing and the opposite thing all in once. Like, you got both right there in front of you, surrounding the golden calf story, beginning of it and the end of it, or the middle end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then how does it end? It ends with the big boss going, okay, now that you've taken your action and you've reestablished your position as leader and that we need followers, it's my job to come through now and go, wait a second. There's still some people here who are potentially dangerous as follower in their followership. They need to be taken care of. That's my job. And he does it.
With the idea that then at that point, not that all's forgiven, but at least all is back into a position where
we can move forward, right? We can move forward. We can take next steps. We can figure out what we're going to do next. And I mean, Moses does. He like puts up his tent and it's, what's it called? It's the tent of meeting, right? And anyone who wanted to hear about God, they went out of the camp in order to hear what God wanted, right?
Now, does the Aaron piece fit into this too then at that point? Because him becoming the high priest, the forgiveness piece, the trust piece, the moving on piece, is all
so
that
that's
true?
It's really interesting. The Aaron part doesn't come to conclusion until much later.
So at this point, he's floating?
Yeah. At what point? I don't have a point here. I mean, I may not have read it right, but I don't see a point here where Aaron makes it right for himself. He hasn't yet made it right for himself. He does later. There are points later on where he does, and that changes the dynamic. But if we go from Golden Calf, the beginning of 32, and you read through the Golden Calf story itself, and builds the altar, he throws the things in, Golden Calf, blah, 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 nothing. I'm literally scrolling down in Safari right now. Nothing. No Aaron. The only thing we get Aaron is, Lord, let, right? He says, Lord, let not my Lord be enraged. You know that these people are bent on evil. He's literally blaming the people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, not a good...
Like, there's nothing here where Aaron makes it right. It happens later. But he does. He does make it right later.
It's an interesting thing. Like, I feel like the Aaron leadership story is its own conversation in terms of its ebb and flow, because absent knowing what happens in this story in the next phase of it, I imagine most people would assume that he is done for and you're never going to hear from him again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you can even forgive him, but like, okay, he's forgiven, but like, yeah, we're done here. Right? And it's really the opposite that happens to him. Is not only is he not forgotten, he becomes the spiritual leader of the people in the holiest of places. And then you want to say that he, quote unquote, fixes his whole destiny or his whole legacy as the high priest. Then he loses his sons, and then he's viewed as the person of peace, right? Going through, and then the one who runs through the camp at the plague later on, right? Like, it's redemptive. It's so interesting. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
okay.
It really is. And like, if you were to just follow the Aaron story, like, he's Mishneh Moshe. He's like Moshe's right-hand man, right?
Yeah.
His authority, all of his authority comes from Moses, but then he becomes the high priest. So technically he has his own authority when he has that position. And even there, though, for instance, when his sons burn the incense and run into the tent and right, what happens? Moses tells him, you don't stop. You have to be the leader right now. You have to demonstrate that you know what they did is wrong, and you have to hold that line. And that is part of the redemption moment against the golden calf. It's where someone was doing something that goes against one of the standard operating procedures in the Bible about you do this thing, right? The SOPs, or one of the processes, depending on how high you want to look at this specific. I think of it as an SOP. You go, okay, but the leader is going to stand firm and go, when you go against SOPs, you're going to get burned. Okay, I have to hold that line, even if it's my own kids. If it's my own kids, if they don't follow SOP, they're going to get burned. And it's such a different thing. Moses has to help him with it, which is interesting because it's another look of what leadership looks like, is a leader helping another leader grow. Which is what a lot of people think leadership is, helping other leaders grow. I don't agree, but it's a whole other story. But this is an aspect of it. He's helping Aaron grow into his leadership.
Right.
It's beautiful. And this is part of the tikkun. This is part of his moment of, the calf versus now. No, he needed Moshe there with him to take that step. Later on, he doesn't. Later on, he does it more on his own. More, not absolutely. At no point does he do it absolutely on his own. He needs Moses all the way down to the end. He dies before Moshe.
Right.
He's such an interesting character. I find looking at Aaron as leader a very interesting character, and Moses as I called it middle management, but as like both follower and leader, as super dynamic and super interesting, as opposed to the way a lot of people see him, which is Moses, the prophet, the leader.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that point, I think, a lot, just as a concept of viewing these leaders as middlemen, or again, the intermediary is typically speaking how they go between, but effectively then the go between is the middle manager. Such a fascinating point. Okay, we're gonna stop there, even though we never got to the actual event itself after almost 90 minutes of the conversation.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. As I said at the outset, once it's a conversation on the subject, even if it's prepared or it's unstructured, however it's going to be, it's going to go in different directions, and it doesn't have to have sort of an ending that it ends in this very formal and tight and knotted, structure. I don't think that has to be the case. I think what we got here is this incredibly deep picture of this whole notion of leadership and followership in a way that requires much more study and learning and understanding because I think we talk about leadership a lot. We don't talk about followership enough. So understanding, right? So I'm saying understanding it at any depth for most people is like, not even an inch deep, right? So, and certainly not wide at all. But so it's an important flip of understanding how this goes, because I think a lot of the time, and I usually do, I'm in the same way. I always I focus most often on the leader because I'm super interested in how the leader handles themselves, thinks about things, decides, acts, and so on. And I think less often about the people. Sometimes I've talked about it, over the last 4 years. Most of the time I'm focused on the leader, and to look at this as not just what you call a failure of leadership, but a failure of followership is a very interesting and different viewpoint about it. And then talking about how that plays forward in history to now, that we're still not great at it. But perhaps that's what our uniqueness as a people is, our inability to follow, or maybe an unwillingness to follow in some cases, right? It keeps in mind the idea that Abraham stood apart, right? And it's very much that legacy of standing on the other side, of being on the other side and not relenting and not giving up and not giving in, and an unwillingness to just capitulate to something because we disagree, because we want to make everybody happy. Yeah, it doesn't work. So, to me, that's a super interesting learning that I had here today. So
I think that speaks to a lot of, what Jews have done. Like, Jews are going to take the perhaps less popular perspective, but the one that they go, but this is the right one. This is the right one. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, finish it out for us, Doc.
Okay, so I think to finish it out, really what I think, or what seems to me to be a lesson we can learn from the golden calf, is that leaders and leadership and followers and followership are uniquely intertwined. And if we only look at one side of it, we're failing to see the whole picture. That's lesson one. And lesson two, which I think is super duper important, is that someone can fail in the moment. That doesn't make them a failure, right? Moses comes back and does right. The Levites do right. Aaron eventually does right, and it gets better and it works better. Failures in the moment of leadership don't mean that the entire process is dead. Failures in the moment in followership don't necessarily mean that the entire process is done and gone. And if we think about it that way, and we see the golden calf as one of those moments, then it becomes a much different picture to look at.
Yeah.
Then this is such the sin of the golden calf. It was so bad, but we still made it to Israel.
Right. It was bad,
but we still made it. Okay, it was the next generation, but we still made it. And the people kept walking, and look at what happened. And look at our history. Looking at it through that perspective, failures happen. Okay, so what are you going to do to make it better next time? Are you going to step up as a leader or as a follower?
It would have been a much different story if it all worked out perfectly.
Seriously.
It would have been a lot less interesting.
We would have had a lot less to talk about. That's for certain.
True. That's certainly true. It's true. Okay. We're going to leave it there. Thank you, Dr. D. I appreciate it. It's been an illuminating and enlightening hour and a half together. And, we're going to have you back to talk about the rest of the story and some others as we go into the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you.